For a decade, I built my brand on logic, on cold, hard facts. I've slept in graveyards, walked through abandoned asylums, and investigated countless haunted claims. My mission? To debunk, to prove that every bump in the night, every whisper in the dark, had a perfectly rational, scientific explanation. Drafty windows, overactive imaginations, the human mind playing tricks. I didn't believe in ghosts. I believed in skepticism, and frankly, I was damn good at it. Until I met Eastern State Penitentiary. Eastern State, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Opened in 1829, it wasn't just a prison, it was an experiment. The first true penitentiary, designed not just for punishment, but for penance. Solitary confinement was the rule. No talking, no seeing other prisoners, just isolation, silence, and the iron belief that this would lead to rehabilitation. Instead, it led to madness for many. They say its Gothic, fortress-like walls have seen more suffering than almost any other building in America. And for years, people have whispered about the spirits of its tormented inmates still trapped within. I arrived, gear in hand, ready to film my next exposé. Night one, the place was vast, empty, and strangely quiet. My initial walkthrough felt exactly like all the others. Creaky floors, shadows playing tricks in the low light, standard stuff. I filmed myself explaining how the acoustics could create echoes, how dust motes could look like orbs on camera. I was in my element. But as I ventured deeper, particularly the older, unrenovated cell blocks, that familiar confidence started to feel thin. Cell block 12. They called it the Ghost Wing, most notorious for its Klondike cells, cramped, windowless boxes where prisoners were sometimes kept in complete darkness for weeks. When I stepped in there, the air didn't just get cold, it got heavy, like the atmospheric pressure had tripled. I felt a prickle on my skin, that almost electric sensation that prefaces a storm. I told myself it was just the decay, the poor ventilation. Then I heard it, a distinct scrape of metal against concrete. Not loud, but unmistakable. 3 cells down. I stopped dead. I called out a sarcastic, "Hello, anyone there?" There was no one. The sound didn't repeat. I checked my equipment. Nothing. Just silence. But it wasn't the same silence. I tried to rationalize it. A rodent, maybe, old pipes, anything. But as I walked past those cold, empty cells, the feeling of being watched intensified. I felt a chill that permeated my clothes, going right to my bones. I was mid-sentence talking to the camera about thermal fluctuations when it happened. I felt it. A hand, ice cold, firm, and undeniably real, pressing against the center of my back. It wasn't a push, more like a deliberate touch. My breath hitched, my heart hammered against my ribs. I froze, paralyzed for a terrifying second. There was no one there. I spun around shouting, "Who's there?" Empty corridor. My camera, which I'd set up on a tripod, was rolling. I checked my own body, frantically looking for a bruise, anything. I fled that cell block like a scared kid. Back in my room, hours later, I forced myself to review the footage. At the exact moment I felt the hand, the camera image glitched, a burst of static. But the audio was clear. Beneath my own startled gasp, there was a low, guttural whisper. It wasn't a word, it was a name. My grandfather's name, the one he was called only by his mother. A name I've never told anyone on camera or even in casual conversation. I still don't understand it. I have no rational explanation for that sound, for that touch, for that whisper. I came to Eastern State to debunk. I left, forever changed. I don't just believe in ghosts. Now I'm afraid of them. Because some things, some agonies, are too powerful to stay trapped within walls. They find a way out, and sometimes they find you. Rome, the eternal city. A place where history isn't just taught, it's breathed. Every stone tells a story. I've always been drawn to the echoes of empires, the rise and fall of civilizations. But beneath the glorious ruins of emperors and gods, there lies a darker, more primitive past. A past that whispers not of triumph, but of suffering. A past enshrined in the oldest, most infamous prison of the Roman world, the Mamertine. The Carcer Mamertinus, or Mamertine Prison, built right into the Capitoline Hill, beneath the very seat of Roman power. For centuries, it was Rome's most secure and most dreaded dungeon. Captured kings, enemies of the state, early Christians like St. Peter and St. Paul, all were said to have been held here, awaiting execution. It wasn't designed for long-term imprisonment, but for torture and a slow, agonizing death. Prisoners were thrown into the lower pit, the Telenium, a dark, sewage-filled cistern, often left to starve or choke on the fumes. I can still smell it, a mix of wet limestone, iron, and something sour, like old sweat and older fear. As I descended into the cold, damp silence, the world above seemed to vanish. The sounds of modern Rome faded, replaced by the heavy quiet of antiquity. The air grew thick, oppressive. My flashlight beam danced over walls that have stood for millennia, witness to unspeakable horrors. You can read about it in history books, but nothing prepares you for the feeling of being in that space. It wasn't just cold, it was a profound, aching chill that penetrated right to your bones, a stark contrast to the Roman sun I just left behind. And then the Telenium, the lower pit. It felt less like a room and more like a tomb, a dark, circular chamber carved out of the living rock. They say prisoners were simply thrown in through a hole in the ceiling, never to see daylight again. Standing there, I felt like the walls were leaning in, trying to crush the breath out of me. As I ran my hand over the jagged, cold rock face, I felt a vibration, not a sound, but a pulse, a faint, rhythmic tremor against my fingertips. I closed my eyes, trying to focus on that vibration, to really feel the history. And for a heartbeat, I wasn't in 2026. I was in the dark, truly dark, hearing the rhythmic wet thud, thud, thud of someone weeping in the absolute corner of the pit. The sound was so vivid, so real. It was like they were right next to me, just out of sight. A profound, bone-deep sorrow filled me, a despair that wasn't my own. When I opened my eyes, the weeping didn't stop. It wasn't in my ears, but it was in the air around me, a palpable presence. It followed me. I didn't run, but I moved quickly, up the ancient steps, past the upper cells, and finally back into the pale light of the Roman Forum. But the sound, the feeling of that profound grief didn't vanish. It clung to me. It followed me all the way to the exit, lingering like an invisible shadow. I tried to immerse myself in the bustling Roman streets, but the weight of that stone, the echoes of that suffering felt imprinted on me. That day, I realized something profound. The stone of Mamertine Prison doesn't just hold the building up, it holds the memories in. The despair, the suffering, the sheer rage of those long-forgotten souls. They never truly left those ancient walls. Some memories, some agonies are too powerful to ever truly sleep. They're waiting, and sometimes, if you're quiet enough, they'll let you hear them. I've always preferred the quiet, the solitude. That's why I took the night security job at the Old Melbourne Gaol. I wanted the calm, the peace of empty corridors, the satisfaction of being the lone sentinel. It was perfect. Or so I thought. What I got instead wasn't solitude, it was a roommate I couldn't see. a lingering presence that refused to acknowledge its own demise. The Old Melbourne Gaol in Australia. From 1842 to 1929, it was home to some of Victoria's most notorious criminals, including the legendary bushranger Ned Kelly, who was hanged right within its walls. It was a place of brutal discipline, solitary confinement, and over 130 executions. Imagine the sheer weight of despair, the fear, the rage that permeated these blue stone walls for nearly a century. People have always said the place was haunted. I, of course, dismissed it as folklore, just the dark history playing on people's minds. My first week on the job was eventful, but nothing I couldn't explain, or so I told myself. I had finished my rounds, meticulously checking every lock, every window, especially the heavy iron door leading to the old hanging beam. I'd come back an hour later and it would be open, not just ajar, but swinging wide, as if someone had just walked through. I blamed faulty mechanisms, temperature changes, but it kept happening. Then objects would be moved. A small stool in a cell would be flipped over. A chain that was coiled neatly would be spread across the floor. Petty things, but persistent. I started to get the distinct feeling I wasn't alone, that familiar prickle on the back of your neck, the sense of eyes on you even in an empty room. I'd call out, "Hello? Anyone there?" Just the echo of my own voice. But the silence that followed felt responsive, like something was listening. One night, I was checking the old infirmary, a particularly bleak part of the prison. I distinctly heard a heavy, dragging footstep come from the main corridor, followed by the clink of metal, like keys. I rushed out, expecting to find a colleague, but the corridor was completely empty, stretching into darkness. It was around 3 a.m. on a particularly dark night. My routine had me heading towards the old gallows, where the executions took place. As I rounded the corner, I saw him, a man. He was walking ahead of me, slowly, purposefully, in a frayed, old-fashioned denim uniform, the kind the Gaol guards wore in the 19th century. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Hey," I shouted, "stop! Who are you?" He paused. Slowly, he turned, and then I saw his eyes. Or rather, I saw the absence of them. Two voids of pure, agonizing rage. No light, no life, just bottomless wells of anger. He didn't vanish in a puff of smoke. He walked through me. The sensation was like being dunked in liquid nitrogen, an electric shock mixed with an unbearable cold. I gasped, stumbling backward, hitting the wall. The chill lingered, a phantom coldness where he had passed. I don't remember much after that, just a blur of adrenaline and pure, unadulterated terror. I must have stumbled out of there, fumbled for my keys, and drove home in a daze. I barely slept. The image of those empty, furious eyes, the icy touch as he passed me, it was seared into my mind. I didn't even clock out properly. I just left. I resigned the next morning. You can't guard a place where the inmates have been dead for 100 years but still refuse to leave their cells, or where the guards are still on duty even though their shift ended over a century ago. The Old Melbourne Gaol isn't just a museum, it's a living archive of pain and unresolved presence. Some souls never truly leave. They just keep working their shifts, forever trapped in the echoes of their own dark history. I'm an urban explorer. My passion is finding places the world has forgotten, abandoned, decayed. These places aren't just ruins, they're time capsules, frozen moments of history. I've seen some incredible things. Grand ballrooms swallowed by nature, factories consumed by rust. I thought I'd seen every kind of decay, every kind of hidden history, but nothing, absolutely nothing prepared me for what I found in the ghost wing of an 18th century English prison. This particular prison, nestled deep in the English countryside, had been abandoned for well over a century. A grim, forbidding place of gray stone, designed for maximum misery. It was notorious for its harsh conditions, its labyrinthine corridors, and its utter isolation. The elements had truly taken their toll. Roofs had collapsed, floors were rotting, and nature was slowly reclaiming everything. Locals whispered about it, but no official tours, no preservation, just slow, agonizing decay. I'd spent hours navigating its treacherous interior, avoiding collapsing staircases and giant sinkholes. But then I found it, a section of the prison known by locals as the Ghost Wing. It felt different, quieter. The decay seemed to stop abruptly at a certain point, giving way to a strange, almost preserved quality in some areas, like time itself hadn't quite finished its work here. There was an oppressive stillness, a sense of deep, profound wrongness that settled in my gut. It was in this wing that I spotted something peculiar, a cell. But it wasn't like the others. It had been completely bricked up from floor to ceiling, with newer bricks that were poorly matched to the ancient stone. It was a crude, desperate job, as if someone had wanted to seal something away permanently. I ran my hand over the rough brickwork, and then I saw it, a small gap, no bigger than my thumb, where the mortar had crumbled away near the bottom, just enough to peek through. My heart started to beat a little faster. This wasn't just old, this felt hidden. My instincts screamed at me. This wasn't just an old cell, this was a mystery waiting to be unveiled. I pulled out my trusty GoPro attached to an extendable monopod and carefully, painstakingly slid it into the narrow gap. The feed popped up on my phone, and what I saw on that monitor made me drop the camera. The cell looked brand new, impossibly so. The straw on the floor was yellow and fresh as if just laid. A small wooden stool stood against the far wall, and on that stool, a candle, burning, its flame flickering gently as if in a breeze. But the prison has been abandoned and roofless for decades. There's no oxygen in that sealed room to feed a flame. I couldn't breathe. My mind raced, trying to find a rational explanation. A prank? A very elaborate setup? But the dust on the outside of the bricked-up cell was untouched. This was ancient. I picked up my camera, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. I kept watching. The candle burned. The straw lay undisturbed. I realized I wasn't looking at a room. I was looking at a tear in the fabric of reality. That prisoner wasn't just haunting the cell. He was still living in 1840, forever serving a life sentence, trapped in a loop of time, completely unaware of the centuries that had passed. And I had accidentally peered into it. I had witnessed a ghost not of memory, but of an ongoing, living past. I didn't try to open the cell. I couldn't. What right did I have to disturb that profound, terrible isolation? I left the prison that day, leaving the GoPro feed playing in my mind. We think of the past as something gone, something we can learn from, but what if it's still happening somewhere? What if the despair, the suffering, the sheer rage of those long-forgotten souls never truly left those ancient stone walls? I used to seek out history. Now I understand that sometimes history reaches out and touches you, and it can be more terrifying than any ghost story.